Imagine this. You are standing in a silent room stripped of every distraction. No phone, no screen, no hum of background music, not even the faint vibration of a notification waiting to be answered. Just silence. At first, the stillness feels like a relief, a pause in the chaos. But within minutes, unease begins to creep in. Your mind twitches like a restless animal, scanning for stimulation, searching for something, anything, to fill the void. The absence of noise suddenly feels unbearable, as though silence itself has become hostile. Now ask yourself, why does emptiness feel threatening? Why is doing nothing so intolerable? If you were free, wouldn't you welcome this moment of peace? Yet you don't. You crave escape, even if it's meaningless scrolling, even if it's watching the same recycled videos, even if it's drowning in endless chatter you secretly despise. You tell yourself it's harmless, but why then does your attention feel perpetually fractured? Your focus fragile, your very sense of self stretched thin across countless fragments of stimulation. Here lies the paradox. We live in an age of infinite entertainment, and yet boredom stalks us more than ever. We consume oceans of content, yet feel emptier with every sip. The world is louder, faster, brighter, and somehow you feel duller, slower, dimmer inside. Every moment is saturated with stimulation, but when was the last time you truly felt alive? Think of it. The very tools meant to connect you leave you lonelier. The endless feeds that promise knowledge leave you more confused. The constant rush of stimulation doesn't satisfy. It agitates. It gives you 1,000 small jolts of dopamine, but robs you of the ability to sink into meaning. You are amused but rarely moved, distracted but never truly present. Isn't it strange that with more to see, you see less? With more to hear, you listen less? With more to experience, you feel less? And yet, you keep reaching. The stimulation is never enough, but neither is its absence. You are caught between two hungers, the hunger for distraction and the hunger for depth. One is always being fed, the other starved. So what is happening here? Why does abundance leave you impoverished? Why does constant stimulation designed to keep you happy so often make you miserable instead? Is it because you have forgotten how to be still? Or is it because stillness has been stolen from you? The question is larger than technology, larger than entertainment, larger even than modern life itself. It goes to the very core of human psychology. What if the misery you feel is not an accident, but the inevitable outcome of living in a world that mistakes stimulation for meaning? This is the riddle you now stand before. In a time where everything is designed to capture your attention, do you truly possess your own mind, or have you become its prisoner? And as this silence deepens, the unease in your chest grows sharper, forcing the next question. If stimulation is the cage, what does freedom look like? The restlessness you feel is not random. It is the symptom of a deeper wound, a fracture within modern consciousness itself. The hunger for constant stimulation did not appear overnight. It was planted, cultivated, and reinforced until it became the very air you breathe. Consider this: you were not born impatient. As a child, you could lose yourself for hours in a single game, a single thought, a single patch of sunlight falling across the floor. But now, your attention is restless, fragmented, unable to linger. Something changed. What was it? Psychology offers one clue. B.F. Skinner showed how variable rewards could trap behavior in a loop stronger than any predictable pattern. A slot machine does not pay every time, but precisely because it doesn't, it becomes irresistible. The world you inhabit today is a digital slot machine dressed in infinite disguises. Every notification, every scroll, every new post is a lever pulled, a gamble placed, a fragment of your soul mortgaged to the hope of one more spark of novelty. But psychology alone does not explain the weight of your misery. For that, you must look to philosophy. Schopenhauer once wrote that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. In the past, boredom was the enemy. But today it is pain itself, the pain of emptiness, of silence, of being left alone with your thoughts, that terrifies you most. And so you flee not toward meaning but toward distraction. Nietzsche warned that when a society loses its capacity to suffer meaningfully, it drowns itself in trivial pleasures. What he called the last men, creatures of comfort, allergic to struggle, seeking only entertainment, sound eerily like us. These last men smile, scroll, consume, but behind their eyes burns an unspoken despair, the despair of never having lived authentically. Carl Jung saw this from another angle. He argued that what we refuse to face in the depths of our psyche returns in distorted form. By avoiding silence, we avoid the self, the unconscious, the raw material of our growth. But the shadow you refuse to confront will not vanish. Instead, it leaks into every corner of life as restlessness, anxiety, depression. In other words, the misery you blame on external circumstances may simply be the echo of the inner life you abandoned. Aldous Huxley in Brave New World foresaw a culture intoxicated not by tyranny but by pleasure. His fear was not that we would be enslaved by what we hate, but that we would be numbed by what we love. Distraction itself becomes the prison. Pleasure becomes the leash. And when that happens, freedom feels indistinguishable from emptiness, so you run back to the cage. Here lies the hidden problem. Constant stimulation is not simply a nuisance. It is a restructuring of your very consciousness. It rewires desire, reshapes thought, redefines boredom as pain and silence as failure. It leaves you incapable of depth, allergic to stillness, estranged from your own inner world. You do not merely consume distraction, you are consumed by it. And here is the cruelest irony. Stimulation promises to expand your world, but in truth it shrinks it. Each jolt narrows your field of attention, turning your vast inner landscape into a corridor of quick rewards. You mistake this corridor for life itself. The infinite becomes the shallow, and the shallow becomes unbearable. This is why you feel the hunger that no amount of scrolling, watching, or consuming can satisfy. It is not that you are weak. It is that the system you live in is designed to cultivate your weakness. Your dissatisfaction is not personal failure, it is structural design. You are chasing shadows in a hall of mirrors built to keep you running. But if this is true, if the very structure of your attention has been hijacked, then the real question is not whether you are distracted, but whether you are still capable of being free. And if freedom exists, it must mean more than simply turning off your phone. It must mean unearthing something buried far deeper, something that constant stimulation was designed to keep hidden. Think for a moment about what constant stimulation actually does to you. Not in the surface sense of wasted hours, but in the silent architecture of your mind. Neuroscience tells us that every repeated action carves a groove in the brain. The more you reach for stimulation, the more your neurons wire themselves into craving it. What begins as habit solidifies into identity. You stop asking, "What do I want to think about?" Instead, your brain asks, "What's next? What's new?" Dopamine, the neurochemical currency of anticipation, is not evil in itself. It was meant to help our ancestors hunt, explore, and create. But under conditions of endless novelty, dopamine becomes a tyrant. Each hit feels good, but the baseline drops lower. You grow less capable of sustained effort, less tolerant of discomfort, less willing to remain with anything that does not give instant reward. The muscle of your attention atrophies. The soul of your patience shrinks. You become trapped in what psychologists call the present bias, an obsession with immediate gratification, even at the cost of long-term well-being. This shift is not just neurological, it is existential. When every quiet moment becomes unbearable, you lose the ability to descend into depth. And without depth, meaning itself evaporates. Viktor Frankl once observed that man's deepest need is not pleasure but purpose. But how can you pursue purpose when you cannot endure the silence in which purpose is found? The moment reflection begins, you flee back into stimulation like a prisoner terrified of open skies. The consequences spread outward like cracks in glass. Relationships, for instance, suffer. When your attention is fractured, intimacy weakens. You are present in body but absent in soul, scrolling while someone speaks, nodding while your mind is elsewhere. The very fabric of human connection, which requires slowness and patience, frays under the weight of perpetual distraction. Loneliness multiplies not because you lack contact, but because you lack presence. Society itself bends under this hidden gravity. Entire economies thrive on keeping you stimulated. Attention is the new oil, and you are both the resource and the machine. Platforms design algorithms not to serve you, but to feed upon you, to keep you locked in cycles of craving. The consequence is not simply personal misery, but collective vulnerability. A distracted population is easier to manipulate, easier to divide, easier to pacify. Bread and circuses have returned, but now they glow in your pocket, whispering with every vibration. Don't look too deeply. Don't ask too much. Just stay amused. And yet, despite all the stimulation, you feel strangely absent from your own life. Have you noticed this? That your memories blur, your days dissolve into one another? Constant stimulation fragments time itself. Each moment becomes a disposable unit of attention, consumed and discarded before it can root into memory. Depth requires slowness, but slowness has been outlawed by the cult of speed. And so you look back and wonder, where did the years go? Did you live them? Or did you merely consume them? This erosion reaches even your sense of self. Without silence, you have no mirror. Without boredom, you have no confrontation with your inner world. You live outwardly, stitched together by external stimuli, and in the absence of them, you feel hollow. The self becomes conditional, real only when it is seen, validated, or distracted. You exist not as a being, but as a reaction. Do you see how profound this trap is? What began as harmless amusement becomes a theft of meaning, a quiet suffocation of the soul. The cost is not just lost productivity, not just wasted time. The cost is your life itself, the unlived depths, the unasked questions, the unseen horizons. And so the urgency builds. You can feel it in the gnawing unease that never leaves, in the exhaustion that no amount of stimulation can cure. The truth is simple yet unbearable. The more you consume, the less you live. But this is not the end of the story. Because if these consequences are unseen yet devastating, then the path forward must be something more radical than moderation, more daring than self-help cliches. The rebellion must strike at the root. The question now is, how do you break free from a prison that feels indistinguishable from pleasure? To break free, you must first recognize the scale of your captivity. The trap of constant stimulation is not something you can solve with minor adjustments, with another productivity hack or digital detox weekend. The rebellion required is not cosmetic. It is existential. It demands a reversal of the very instincts you have been trained to obey. Imagine stepping out of the stream. Everyone else is being carried along, scrolling, clicking, refreshing. But you decide to stand still. At first it feels impossible, even painful, as if your skin is crawling with absence. But this pain is not proof of failure, it is proof of detox. You are feeling the withdrawal from a drug that has shaped your consciousness. The rebellion begins by daring to endure the silence that stimulation taught you to fear. History shows us that those who discovered freedom often began in silence. Nietzsche would retreat into the mountains, walking for hours, letting ideas ferment in solitude. Jung descended into his own unconscious, sketching visions others would have dismissed as madness, but which later gave birth to his deepest insights. Even the Stoics, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, framed stillness as a battlefield, a place where one learns to master the self rather than be mastered by the world. Their rebellion was not loud but inward, an act of reclaiming the territory of the mind. This is where the shift must happen. You must stop confusing stimulation with life. Life is not what flashes across the screen. It is what emerges when the screen is gone. The rebellion is a radical revaluation of value itself. You learn to see boredom not as an enemy, but as a doorway. You reinterpret silence not as emptiness, but as the soil of meaning. You begin to notice that beneath the agitation of withdrawal lies something sturdier: attention, patience, depth. But how do you practice this in a world engineered to enslave you? Start with one principle: reclaim the spaces between. The moments when you would normally reach for your device, waiting in line, walking, waking up, lying in bed. Let them remain unfilled. These empty spaces, once feared, become your training ground. Each time you resist the reflex to stimulate, you carve a new groove in the brain, one that points toward freedom rather than addiction. From here, you can move deeper, replace passive consumption with active creation. Write instead of scroll, walk instead of refresh. Read one page with focus rather than skimming 100 articles in haste. The point is not to renounce all stimulation, but to choose it consciously, to take back authorship over where your attention goes. For attention is life. To lose it is to lose yourself. You may find that this rebellion feels lonely at first. The world is built for distraction, and by resisting it, you stand apart. But is this not the essence of freedom? To belong to yourself rather than to the market? To live by your own rhythm rather than one imposed by algorithms? Kierkegaard called this the leap into authenticity, the terrifying, liberating decision to stand before existence without the shield of distraction. And in this rebellion, a strange paradox unfolds. The less stimulation you chase, the more alive the world becomes. A simple meal tastes richer. A conversation penetrates deeper. A moment of silence reveals more truth than hours of noise. You discover that life, stripped of its glittering distractions, has always been enough. This is the essence of breaking free, not running away from the world, but learning to see it again. To feel time instead of kill it. To inhabit your body instead of abandoning it. To meet your own thoughts without fear. The rebellion is not easy, but it is sacred, and once you have tasted it, you cannot go back. Because you realize the prison was never entertainment, never technology, never culture. The prison was the part of you that believed stimulation was the same as living. So the question remains, if rebellion gives you back your attention, your presence, your depth, what ultimate truth lies waiting once the distractions fall silent? At last, when the noise subsides and the reflex to reach for stimulation loosens its grip, something unexpected surfaces. It is not boredom. It is not emptiness. It is something older, something waiting, something that feels like the forgotten ground of your being. You realize the truth. You were never craving stimulation. You were craving yourself. The endless scroll, the compulsive reach, the restless distraction were never about the content you consumed. They were about avoiding the encounter with your own existence. Constant stimulation was not filling your life. It was shielding you from it. And now the veil has lifted. You see that silence is not the enemy, but the birthplace of depth. Within stillness, the mind does not collapse. It expands. Within boredom, the soul does not wither. It awakens. Every philosopher who wrestled with despair, every mystic who sought transcendence, every artist who touched eternity, they all knew what the modern world has forgotten. That meaning arises not from what constantly moves you, but from what roots you. The ultimate truth is both devastating and liberating. Your misery was never caused by a lack of stimulation, but by its excess. You were drowning in shallow waters, mistaking splashes for the ocean. The ocean was always within you. Consider this. Every fleeting distraction will vanish. Platforms will die, devices will break, algorithms will change. But the awareness behind your eyes, the still point at the center of your being, remains. This is what constant stimulation tries to bury. The realization that you already possess the one thing you have been searching for, presence. And presence is not passive. It is the most radical act of rebellion. In presence, time slows. In presence, life reveals itself with unbearable clarity. The taste of food, the texture of air, the trembling in another's voice. Suddenly, the ordinary shatters into the extraordinary. You understand why the mystics spoke of eternity being contained in a single breath, a single glance, a single now. But here lies the final paradox. This truth cannot be consumed. It cannot be scrolled, clicked, or downloaded. It must be lived. And the cost of living it is everything your culture has taught you to cling to: speed, distraction, stimulation. You must let them burn and in their ashes rediscover the simplicity of being. So the choice is before you. Continue feeding the hunger that never ends, or step into the silence where hunger dissolves. One path offers amusement without meaning. The other offers meaning so vast it may terrify you. And perhaps that is the point. Freedom has always been frightening. But misery is what happens when you trade freedom for stimulation. So imagine once more standing in that silent room. No screen, no noise, just you. And instead of reaching outward, you finally turn inward. For the first time, the silence does not feel hostile. It feels like home.